Hello again, yet another one. One of the problems, I've said this several times in other videos, one of the problems when one becomes something of a student of metaphysics, problems that one encounters when one is talking to presumably the same audience. I don't know who will be watching this, but you know, what do you talk about next? Well, I just look for something to give me a clue. One thing I have noticed on the YouTube videos, and it particularly seems to apply to some of the astronomy videos, and I have seen it over and over again where I don't necessarily watch the video, but I just look at the title or caption underneath, and it says we got a surprise when we looked at such and such. Oh, we misjudged the rate at which the Andromeda Galaxy is approaching the Milky Way. We got a surprise when we looked at the Milky Way and something we hadn't realized. Oh, we looked at this planet and whichever planet and that we weren't expecting that, and it goes on and on and on. And I've even heard or seen the thumbnails for videos where it's indicated, oh well, we got this wrong. Well, I can tell you why they're getting it wrong, and it's simple enough. And one of the big problems with mainstream science is that there are, for want of a better term, forces behind the scenes that you normally don't hear about, who have been steering all aspects of education into a more materialistic, let's just say, line of thought, okay, a direction, a materialistic direction. That will automatically block probably more than 90, even 95% of what there is to learn about any given thing. And I will tell you exactly why. So let's start from basics, shall we? And we'll look at the situation as best I can describe it within my own limits of understanding. Let's look at the basic principles behind things, okay? And you will see why. Okay, and the scientists, and I'm a fan of science, and I'm not knocking scientists, but I'm saddened because of the direction that they have largely gone in, or the way in which they have investigated the things they do, and it does sadden me. So let's start from square one. You've got the religious people who say in the beginning there was God and nothing else. This is true. There is only one thing in existence which is not physical and unchanging, and that is that creative source or force that some people call God. It's called by many things, okay, and for reasons best known to itself, reasons that we won't even begin to fully understand, for probably hundreds of millions of years. But for reasons best known to itself, it decided to put parts of itself through experience with the objective to ultimately gain complete experience. And although it wasn't physical, nevertheless, as non-physical consciousness, which is what some people call spirit, it had one faculty that it used, and that is the ability to use willpower. willpower, it willed a visualization, which was the beginning of the cosmos. People talk about the Big Bang as if it was an explosion. No, think of it more like an outpouring, a giving out, but not an explosion in the matter or chemical form. It was an outpouring of energy. Excuse me, my ear itches. Sorry about that. And it visualized the beginnings of what we now regard as the cosmos. Now, if you could slow your own mental processes down, on this earth we need to speed them up, but if you could, and you closed your eyes and in the darkness behind your eyelids you tried to visualize something, maybe a scene, what you may not realize because it happens quickly, like in a cinema where you have a projector shining on a screen, so too in your mind's eye you have a blank dark canvas, and for a fraction of a second you've got darkness before an image starts to form, and you create that image in your mind, and you go through the experience where it seems that you see behind your closed eyelids that which you are visualizing, and you are projecting an image onto this darkness. This is in a very vague way. In principle, it's rather much like how things happened in the beginning of the cosmos. That in the beginning there was dark, cold stillness, silent stillness. It was dark, it was cold, there was no light, there was no sound, there was no movement. Just dark, cold, silent stillness. That you can think of as being a field of influence which is being created within the mind of God, if you will. Okay. From that first, we can only theorize on this, but from that first billionth of a second, there was one law which was set in operation, and it is the one law within which everything operates in what we call physical manifestation. Even our modern scientists know of this law. They quote it, but I think many of them don't realize its importance. And that law is that action and reaction are opposite and equal. That is it. And everything that happened after that point was a result of action and reaction being opposite and equal. And it's that simple. Now that field of influence which occurred in the very beginning, before there was any manifestation, before there was anything physical, in other words, at a time when there was no thing. There was no thing, which is not the same as nothing. Because I've seen video clips where people say there was nothing in the beginning. No, there wasn't nothing. There was no thing. But the field of influence existed, and that field of influence we call ether. And that is all that exists. There's nothing else but ether. And ether is not physical in any real sense. It just gives the impression to consciousness of being physical. Okay? So there wasn't nothing, there was no thing. And they're different things entirely. The mind, as it were, of God, using willpower, caused movement and vibration. Well, vibration is movement. Caused movement in the previously static field of ether, field of influence. Now, one of the results of action and reaction being opposite and equal is that immediately that ether, which is a field of influence, started to have motion within it, movement. You had two byproducts which also came about from that, and there are many instances in mainstream physics where you use a triangle and maybe 3 letters or 3 words or names, and it shows you how different things relate to each other. I was trained in electronics, and so I'm familiar with Ohm's law, where you have voltage, current and resistance in a triangle, you know, and it shows you how those 3 things interact. Well, it's exactly the same here. Motion at the top of the triangle, movement, motion. Whenever you get motion in any situation, you always, with a capital A, you always get 2 byproducts of movement, and they are light and sound. Light and sound don't always fall within our ability to see or to hear it, but it's still light and it's still sound, even if we can't see it and can't hear it, just the same as we can't see ultraviolet light and we can't hear ultrasonic vibration. Ultrasonic is above our hearing. Ultraviolet is beyond our ability for the eyes to see it, but it's still light and it's still sound. So in the first instance, when motion started in the previously static ether, light appeared and sound appeared. So the statement, "let there be light," could be rephrased as, "let there be movement producing light." You know? And also, in the beginning was the Word, which is referred to in John, of course. But that particular occasion where it's mentioned is referring more to this solar system than the beginning of the cosmos. In the same way that when you're watching on the shore, you're watching waves coming in from the ocean or in a lake, a large lake or something like that, and you're watching waves coming in on the shore, okay? And you can see individual waves coming in. The reason that you can see individual waves is because the motion of the wave is different to any motion of the water beneath the wave or in front and behind it. And so you can see the region where there is motion, and we see movement. Okay? Exactly the same in the universe, in the cosmos, that all that which we call manifestation or physical matter, physical energy, it is nothing more than movement of the ether. It's ether in motion, and it can vibrate, you know, extremely fast. I mean, you know, thousands of millions of times a second and more than that, you know. Now, the thing that has not yet been realized, I think, from mainstream science, I certainly get that impression from looking at the videos, because people are talking about multiverses, you know, which is simply playing mind games. It's not going anywhere towards reality, it's just playing mind games. The way that I understand it, and I'm fairly sure I'm right, is that there is one universe, not multiple universes, there is one. But within that great, vast, unbelievably vast field of influence, ether, which we call the universe, within that, all vibrations have harmonics and octaves. If you look around this earth, just jumping forward in time, billions, hundreds of billions of years. Actually, are you listening, astronomers? Hundreds and hundreds of billions, not 13 billion, hundreds and hundreds of billions of years. Just come forward to where we are at the moment, and we'll go back. We are sat now, or I am sat now, and it applies to you too, stood or sat wherever you are. You and I are in what we call a physical world. There's my chair. Physical. We call it that. It isn't, but that's what we call it. Okay? That is ether in motion, and the different substances, the metals and the faux leather, and the skin and the bone and the metal of the watch and the leather, all materials, the gases in the atmosphere, it's all ether in motion. But all of those movements have not only harmonics, but they also have octaves. If you think of this world as being a physical world in terms of what we perceive, there are millions and hundreds of millions of people on this planet who have not yet realized, even just intellectually, that in this same space here, where I am, where you are, that there are 6 other physical worlds all occupying the same space at the same time, and they they're interlaced in the same space here where you are. 6 physical planes, realms or worlds around Earth, 7 in total including this one. And the difference between them, or the main difference between them, is all the matter and all the energy on each of those planes is vibrating in a completely different range of frequencies, and therefore it allows them to occupy the same space. Because when you're dealing in different frequencies, different rates of movement, one of the understood laws of physics comes into play. In fact, there are many of them, but one in particular for this explanation is the law of conservation of momentum. I'm going to dart around here. Like most of my videos, I basically just start somewhere and I see where it goes. Okay, so I'm following where I think I'm being led to go. Okay, the law of conservation of momentum. The classic example of this, which I'm sure we've all seen, is the ice skater who goes into a spin on the tip of the blades and holds the arms out. And without putting any further energy into that spin, you notice that when they bring the arms in, they spin faster. And it's a basic law of physics, and it applies to matter too. And that is that if you have, for example, a rotating object, in this case an ice skater, okay, rotating around a central point. Okay, I don't know what the actual figure will be, but just to give you the idea, if, for example, I was spinning around on the tip of my ice skates and I had my arms out, and for example, if the tip of my finger, the furthest point from the axis of rotation, was moving through space at, say, 2 meters per second, okay, through space as I spun. If I reduce the radius of that rotating object, in that case me, okay, the conservation is maintained. The momentum is conserved. The momentum is conserved, and the furthest point from the axis of rotation is still travelling at 2 meters per second. The momentum is conserved. But now it's describing a smaller circle, so it takes less time to get round. So the smaller the radius for a given amount of energy, the faster the object spins. Apply that to matter. If I number the 7 planes or realms, if you like, we'll use the term planes, around Earth, the natural ones, because there are some that are not natural. the 7 natural planes around Earth, if we number them 1 to 7, this world that we see now is plane 1, level 1. Okay? The second one, which is also in the same space here, which is usually called the Astral Realms. This is where most of your friends and relatives will go when they supposedly die, because people don't die. They're simply transferring consciousness to a different plane of vibration, a different octave of vibration. But the Astral Realm has energy and matter which is vibrating in a completely different frequency range to the matter of this world. I believe that all matter and all energies on the astral realms are moving and vibrating 49 times faster than they do here. Don't quote me on that, but that's what I believe at the moment. It could well be correct. So if you have, say, if you took a hydrogen atom of this world as your yardstick, okay? If you made an exact scale model of a hydrogen atom with just a proton with an orbiting electron, and imagine the sphere in which that model existed was about that size, okay? There's a proton and there's an orbiting electron going around it, okay? If you then, in comparison, look at a hydrogen atom on the astral realms, you will find that the electron is orbiting its nucleus 49 times faster. The energetic vibration within the electron and within the proton, it's all occurring 49 times faster. And in keeping with the law of conservation of momentum, the radius of the orbit of that electron is only 1/49th of what it is here. So the atoms on the astral realms are physically smaller. It's not that you've got bigger gaps between them, but the substance of the astral realms, in say 1 cubic centimetre of space, you would have 49 times more atoms in the same space. It's the difference between looking at a low resolution photograph and a high resolution photograph, where you've got more dots per inch. Okay, you've got more atoms per cubic centimetre. So it's a high resolution of matter. But everything is vibrating 49 times faster. If you go on to then level 3, which some people call the mental realms, it's times 49 again. So all matter and all energies are moving and vibrating 49 times faster than on the astral realms, which is 2,401 times faster than they do here. And these things apply to light as well. I don't know where this is going, I'm just following it. Okay, so I think somebody's guiding me. There are a great many mainstream scientists, and I emphasize I'm not knocking them, but this is what they've come to believe, that you cannot travel faster than light. Whether that is correct or not, when the statement is made simply like that, I'm not sure. But you've got to be very careful. One of the things that a student of metaphysics learns is that very often you can make a statement about something and it's correct. You can then make a completely opposite statement about it and it's also correct. And the difference between them is context. Very often you have to put things in context, because in one context a statement is true and in another context it's not true. And you have to be sure what you're actually meaning. Okay, let's look at the speed of light. On this plane, or in this world, and this extends right out, beyond the Earth, but in this frequency range of vibration where we're currently existing, light generally travels just a little bit less than 300 million meters per second, 186,000 miles, etc. And we call that the speed of light. But when you come to the end of your current life, and you leave that body, same as I will leave this one. This can be cremated or buried, and whichever, it doesn't matter, because I won't be in it. You can do what you can put it in a black bag in the bin. As far as I'm concerned, I've finished with it, you know. But when we move on to the astral realms after our life here finishes, and it's a physical world, you know, just like this is, you will discover that light there is travelling 49 times faster than it does here. So imagine you were travelling at half the speed of light on the astral realms. You could be travelling 20 times faster than light does here. So you can say, yes, you can travel faster than light, but on the plane where you are, you're still not travelling faster than light. You see what I mean? So yes, you can travel faster than light. No, you can't travel faster than light. They're both true, but you've got to put the context in. If you look at this ratio of going up plane by plane by plane in terms of vibration, and remembering they're all in the same space, it's times 49, times 49, times 49. I couldn't believe it when I first worked this out with a calculator. By the time you get on to level 7, plane number 7, the highest vibratory plane around this earth, it's the ratio compared to here is 49 to the power of 6. I couldn't believe it when I saw this. 49 to the power of 6. I've forgotten the second decimal point, but it's 13 point, what was it, 84 or something like that. Something, don't quote me on the decimal bit, but it's something like 13.84 billion times faster than here. And light on level 7 is travelling round about 13.8 billion times faster than it does here. You could travel 12 billion times faster than light does here, and on the plane where you are, you're still not travelling faster than light. And you've got to watch this, because you find this throughout the whole of metaphysics. Now, coming back very far back into the distant past, when there was only God, and that consciousness, non-physical consciousness or spirit that some people call God, the original creative force, when it started the process, this is the way I like to think of it, because it's an easy way of explaining at our level of understanding. Imagine like a jellyfish with tendrils. That non-physical consciousness of God projected into that visualization parts of itself, like tendrils of consciousness going into the thought form that it created, so that every individual tip of those tendrils, trillions upon quadrillions of life forms as we now refer to them, you're on the tip of one of those tendrils. You're directly connected to that source from which you came. You're not separate from it, any more than the fingers are separate to the hand. They're not. They appear to be 5 separate fingers or digits, but they're not. It's all one thing. And it's exactly the same with us. We appear to be separate, but we're not. We're still directly connected to that from which we came. We are parts of that God itself. Okay? When God projected parts of itself into the visualization so that they could gain experience, ultimately to gain complete experience over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of years. And this did not start 13 billion years ago, 13 odd billion years ago. Are you listening, astronomers? I have been a formal student of a pretty advanced master of yoga. Not that I'm advanced, but he was. On the 17th of this month, which is December 2020, on the 17th of this month, I have been a formal student of his for 40 years. And it's amazing what you can learn when you listen to somebody who actually does know, isn't speculating, but knows. Okay? The creative source or force that we call God, we regard as being divine. Therefore, all its constituent parts are divine. And the highest part of each one of us as an individual is our own non-physical consciousness or spirit. Spirit, which is simply non-physical consciousness. It's a non-physical awareness that actually exists but is not dependent on anything material to exist, but it needs material things to gain experience. As far, well, things we call material. In reality, they're not. And that very good lecturer who's really made a name for himself from the Isle of Wight, I have great respect for him. He's done a tremendous amount of good, but he gets one thing wrong in terms of terminology, because he refers to the universe as a hologram. Now the intimation, or the suggestion when you use the term hologram is that it is artificially produced using technology. No, it isn't. It's produced by consciousness using willpower, and it is a thought form, not a hologram. No technology per se is involved. It's mind control. Mind has produced it, and it is mind, with the individual, that is experiencing it. No technology is involved. It's purely at levels of mind. So because we are each directly connected, I was going to say physically, in reality connected to that one creative source, we have a part of us which is part of God and is therefore divine. We are all, in fact, all life in the cosmos is spiritual in nature, intrinsically spiritual. Even the most ardent, atheists, I couldn't think of the word, atheists, and skeptics, bank managers, corporation CEOs, insane psychopathic globalists, they're all just as divine in their highest level of existence. We are all spiritual beings. When you look at the cosmos, you have to realize that everything is spiritual in nature because it comes from the one divine source. You see. And not only that, but the physical, as we call it physical, the physical universe, all the matter and all the energies which constitute it exist in different, for want of a better term, different octaves of vibration. So there aren't multiverses, it's one universe. But it exists in octaves, like the octaves in a musical scale. The same pattern which is repeated in a higher frequency range. Exactly the same with matter. Around this earth, around all the planets of this solar system, probably around all matter that exists throughout the whole of this galaxy and beyond. It all exists in octaves. There are billions of human beings, far more alive in many respects than you and I at the moment, inhabiting the astral realm, the mental plane above that, and planes above that, hundreds of millions, hundreds of billions, not hundreds of billions, tens of billions. I was getting carried away with the numbers. Tens of billions. The population of this planet is probably, I would think, maybe 20 to 25 billion. Pure guesswork. It's not 7.5. 7.5 is the number of people who occupy this world, this plane. But what about all your friends and relatives who don't have bodies here at the moment? They're still alive, on the astral realms and the planes above. They're walking around in a physical environment, you know. On the astral realms, you'll see when you pass on that there are mountains and oceans, and there are trees and grass, rivers. There are buildings and billions of people. Billions of people totally unknown to mainstream science. And then you know, sometimes you've got to be a little bit hard. And then these people who are very ignorant send their space probes to Mars and they say there's no life there. When those same people using their same technology cannot detect most of the human beings living on this earth. You know, people don't die. You're travelling around in an organic, electrically driven, organic robot body, and when it comes to the end of its useful life, like a car that becomes dilapidated, you park it up, you get out and you walk away. Exactly the same with this. When the body is useless, there comes a moment where the body goes, okay, the person gets out. The person looking at themselves, they're still alive, they're still real. The body can be buried or cremated, it's finished with. But the person isn't dead, they're still alive. You know, and this is what happens. Eventually, of course, sometime in the future, whether it's a few years or a few centuries, somewhere at an appropriate time, they will connect by pre-arrangement. They will connect to a baby's body in the womb of a mother, and their focus then centres on that baby's body and they're back, and they grow up again as a child. And they go round the reincarnatory cycle over and over again, and that's what we're all doing. But you know, we forget when we're born as a baby. We tend to forget. So anyway, I wasn't going anywhere particularly with this. It was basically just a waffle. But you see, you've got to know the fundamentals before you get into the more complex things. And one of the reasons that science keeps making these mistakes, misjudging things, is because they're looking simply on this plane at the matter that's vibrating within this range, and don't even begin to realize that there are at least 6, certainly around a planet like this, there are 6 other physical octaves of matter and energy, all occupying the same space at the same time, but in totally different frequency ranges. Just like the electromagnetic spectrum. We divide it into sections, don't we? You know? Just like the octaves of a musical scale. It's in octaves, in sections. So is the distribution of matter. And then they look into space and they say, well, there's obviously matter out there which we can't see, and they call it dark matter. It's childishly simple to explain. It doesn't take any maths. You don't have to be an Einstein to understand it. All you've got to say, especially if you're not a scientist, you just want to get a general idea, is just like the musical scale, all matter exists in octaves. And there's at least 6 other octaves of matter around us and out there that you can't see. And of course it has gravity effects and electromagnetic influences exerted, you know. And it's childishly simple, but every person, especially if they want to be a scientist in any of the various scientific fields, needs to have a basic understanding, at least an elementary understanding, of metaphysics before you start going into the basic physics. Because if you're going into basic physics and ignoring metaphysics, you only look at this plane. Just thought of one extra thing to add onto it. This electrically driven organic robot has sense mechanisms built into it. We have microphones on the side of the head. We have light sensitive cells on the retina. We have chemically sensitive cells in the nose and in the mouth for smell and taste. And over the outside of the body and in various places within the body, we have pressure sensitive cells which give us a sense of touch. All of those 5 senses are completely dependent on motion of the ether, when in certain locations there is very little motion in the ether, especially when you look out there, space appears to be empty. It only appears to be empty. It isn't empty, it's full of ether. Absolutely full. In 1958, that great master from Venus, the Master Jesus, actually gave a blessing, and one of the statements in that blessing, in which he was describing what God is. It's in a book called The 12 Blessings, if you'd like to acquire it and actually read what Jesus actually said. In fact, you can actually obtain the audio recordings of it on CDs and listen to what Jesus said in 1958. But one of those statements, well, he's talking about what God is, because God is everything. Everything is God. There's nothing but God. It's all God. There isn't anything else. And he actually said, it is the emptiness of space. It is the fullness contained within space. It's the emptiness of space as we perceive it now. But in reality, it's the fullness of space because it's full of ether. There aren't any empty gaps in space, apart from in maybe very, 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 very rare instances, maybe in those things that scientists theorize on called black holes, where it is physically a hole, where the ether has been pushed aside. And you may get instances like that, but space is full. Now, those five senses can only detect instances where the ether is in motion, which is why when you look into space it looks empty, because you don't see any movement of the ether. In other words, no manifested matter or energy in certain locations. But those people who have learned or have the ability, for one reason or another, to use higher faculties, those which we call psychic, which are quite natural, there's nothing wrong with them at all. I mean, there's no reason why you should. Everybody should be able to see and hear psychically. But thousands of centuries ago, because mankind fell and fell and fell, we came down through evolution rather than going up in the past. Okay, and we became psychically blind and deaf. But it's our birthright to be psychically capable of seeing and hearing, and have clear vision, clairvoyance, and clairaudience, clear hearing, clear cognizance, etc., etc. They're our birthrights. We should all have it, but we've lost them. Okay, but a person who is psychic and has clear vision, clairvoyance, and can look, for example, instead of looking through here, excuse me, if they're moderately advanced, and they can see through here, the brow or Christ chakra, and they see psychically, they are still only picking up on motion of the ether. All of our sense faculties are completely dependent on ether being in motion. You see, everything is movement. A friend of mine, my dear friend John, who now lives in Barnsley, I remember one of his mantras. He used to say, when it comes to understanding the universe, everything is rotation, 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 rotation. Everything is rotation. Well, it's certainly all movement. This was a bit of a waffle, so I've covered enough there. I'm not going to make it any longer. So hopefully I've given one or two people out there something to think about. Okay? Before you can understand anything in great depth, I almost just remembered, one of my heroes, Sir Oliver Lodge, one of the greatest scientists of his day, made a statement that was way ahead of his time. And he, it takes a great mind to make a simple statement like this. And I'll leave you with that thought that he said, the statement he said. He said, nobody can explain everything that happens when I wiggle my little finger. I challenge you, start thinking about what happens when you do that. And you can spend the next 20 years studying everything that happens when they do that. It's not as simple as it looks. And Sir Oliver Lodge knew that. And I bless that man wherever he is. I think he's probably still on the other realms now. So wherever you are, sir, I send you my blessings. And I also thank those for watching and hope that I've given you something to think about. Thank you, my dear friends.